Kate, do you want to take over the questions and grill Robert?
Hi, Kate.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Good to see you.
So we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to jump right in. The first question is from one of the founders of our Women in Tech, ERG. She's based in Amsterdam. And her question is, what does inclusive leadership look like?
Sure. I think, and that's a great question to address here. Inclusive leadership, you all have to define what it is relative to the constituencies that you serve, the stakeholders, right? And then define what it is relative to the body or the population that you're recruiting from, right? You think about, if you're sitting in a homogeneous environment in terms of people and their backgrounds, you have to think about, well, what are the differences in that community that matter that I can include into my conversation? And it might be LGBTQ, whatever it might be, but you've got to be thoughtful about that. And then you have to think about the constituencies that you serve. And the one thing I'll tell you that has changed in this pandemic is we have learned that this work from home, work from anywhere enables more inclusivity in the way that we should construct our businesses, because we no longer have to think about the commuting time to get the contributions from people with different backgrounds into those rooms and those environments. We're sitting in this virtual environment now. We're probably covering every time zone, right, in this environment as we speak. And so now you can actually open your aperture and say, let me be more thoughtful about the customers that I serve and build an organization that actually fits more in line with that and not be constrained by who lives in the neighborhood or who can get to my community or who can get to work within an hour because they got childcare or other sort of things you got to contend with. So that's the way that I think about it and the way we think about it at our company.
Yep. So a follow-up question to that, actually, and you both touched on this with the Facebook example, but Mark Pritchard announced about a year ago that P&G going forward would only work with creative and advertising partners that reflected the communities and customers of P&G. Mm-hmm. Do you have any further thoughts on the role of marketers and advertisers specifically in eradicating systemic inequality?
I will tell you, I think one of the biggest things that can happen, and it's important, is you all call upon your customers to ensure that Black media actually has a fair share of the spend, okay? And I will tell you, to me, that's one of the biggest gaps. I look at the Black media in the US in particular, and there's global, and they are getting fractions of dollars of what they should be getting for the community spend that they have to, purchasing the products, from Procter & Gamble and Colgate and all those sort of things. And I think you all in particular can actually have a great effect of that, right? And say, okay, here's how we are going to ensure that the distribution on the back end is done more efficiently and equitably. And happy to connect you with all my friends who own Black media companies that are constantly struggling to say, hey, listen, let's put some more spin down your channel, right? And that, I think, will enable you to be more effective in calling on the corporate customers and saying, not only are we addressing, quote unquote, the needs of the community in terms of advertising, but we're actually addressing the sustainability of the businesses that will employ more African Americans, Latinx, et cetera, to make, again, a more a holistic ecosystem in the advertising world. So that is kind of one of the areas that I'd point to. Number one is and there's been folks like, Byron Allen and others who've been making calls on corporate executives to do that. But I think that's one of the things that I would focus on if I'm in that space.
I think you touched on this one throughout the entire conversation, but it's by far our most upvoted question, so I'd be remiss to skip it. How can we as S4 Capital ensure that our diversity efforts are authentic, long-lasting, impactful, and not merely tokenism?
Yeah, that is, and it starts at the top, and it starts by saying, here's what we're going to do. And by the way, I'm not going to just tell you to do it. I'm going to actually invest in programs to help you be successful. I always, I joke about this with another Sir Clive Gillison about what we do at Carnegie Hall. I said, Clive, I don't want to do anything we don't underwrite for 10 years. So let's not do things once. Let's figure out, let's do a 10-year program. If we can't support it for 10 years, then we truly aren't interested in doing it. So let's figure out what the program is. Let's build efficient methods to deliver that programming. And in your case, it's education. Happy to what I call lend our capacity to you all in terms of our conscious inclusion program, because that's part of it. I don't know, it's like, and so your people can actually take online courses and actually get educated. And then, okay, well, part of, you think about, your internship program. Okay, we're going to bring in some interns. Great. What have you done to prepare the mentors and the supervisors where those interns are going to be received so that they can be successful, so that they can feel, that they can be themselves, that they can bring their best selves to the environment, and that the environment actually and your people understand, what inclusivity actually looks and feels like. So you as leaders have to take that on as a role and say, how do I give my people the resources, not just hold them to some standard or just say, let me make a $10 million gift and hope it goes well, but frankly, really focus on enabling them to be successful, not just the interns, but on the receiving side. Then, okay, great. How are we going to do it for, rank and file employees? Here's what we're going to do. How are we going to do it in our C-suite? How are we going to do it in our board, right? And that's the beauty of great leadership is you think about these things and you think about how you resource them properly. And resourcing isn't just money. It's actually listening and frankly, tapping into what other people are doing and saying, oh, man, that makes a lot of sense for how I'm organized. Let me figure out how to work that in my organization and make that happen. A lot of what I call a lot of the, tokenism is, oh, let me go get ahead of DE&I, right? And they just kind of sit out there and make reports on how good we're doing or how poorly we're doing in certain areas, as opposed to saying, let me bring specific programming activities that are long lasting and sustainable. And I think that's the key. Look, you're not going to get everything right. Nobody ever does. But if you create a long-term view on here's what we're going to do, and you build it into your culture, then you'll be surprised at how quickly people will accept it, adapt to it, and then how quickly people then accelerate beyond what your wildest imaginations were that could be accomplished.
As a follow-up to that, there's a question on how do we get more people to engage with DE&I efforts? Any takes on that?
If you're talking about internal to the company, again, management by objectives, kind of point one, tie somebody's compensation to it, and I guess what? You'll see changes, right? Second thing is provide programming and access. And it can be as simple as you got to go through, like we all have compliance, forms we have to go through. One of our companies, for instance, ComplySci, every month I've got to go through and, go through these sessions and click, I watched this and I read this, and, they make them creative and fun and all that sort of stuff. If people don't go through their DE&I training, nick them on compensation, and maybe you have to gash them on compensation, whatever it might be. Put, and things that are in their control, hold them to it. Okay. If you have people who are hiring managers and they don't create a diverse workforce that they're hiring, guess what? They haven't done their job. And so they shouldn't be in that job. Right. So I think you got to make all the, the systems, reward systems, very much in concert with what your DEI objectives are. You've got to create that alignment.
There's a question on the World Economic Forum that I think is interesting. As the wealth gap continues to grow, how can leaders hold the World Economic Forum accountable for addressing the wealth gap, especially for people of color?
Yeah, I mean, this is, a classic, people, bash World Economic Forum on the one hand, say, oh, it's a bunch of CEOs and, rich people getting together and talking about things. But what actually happens is, you get leaders who actually, when we converge on problems, we actually figure out ways to solve them and we bring those solutions to bear. One of the challenges I think we have sometimes is there's so many problems we're all trying to solve, and getting coalescence on ones that we think are the most important are like all things, that's where we end up, losing some momentum and certain. But I've been very impressed, frankly, in the decade or so I've been engaged, that we're actually, engaging, solving problems. And I see groups literally getting together multiple times a week, year, and updating on what we're doing together. Like one of the things we're doing is this, six community program in the United States, which will touch 13% of the African American community. But if you actually look at 100-mile radius, it's 50% of the African American community to do the things we talked about, broadband and and healthcare and all those sort of things. Well, guess what? The relationships that are bringing resources to bear are all relationships that I built and formed at World Economic Forum or Business Roundtable. Okay, and these are consciously aware CEOs who are saying, I want to help. How do I solve that problem with you? How do we work together to solve this problem? And bringing, if it's broadband in some cases in Jackson, Mississippi, with our learning management system to ensure that those communities now have access that they didn't have a year ago. Those came from those relationships. And so I frankly love how many of these executives are focused on it. Dan Schulman at PayPal, Rich Lesser now at BCG. We're the ones working on this Six City thing together, right? It's like, okay, well, how do we get some software to these small businesses for payments and those sort of things in a way that's effective for them? I wouldn't have had those relationships had it not been for those organizations that led to us saying, here's a problem that we have globally. How do we solve that problem locally and then scale it so that we can be effective for over a broader number of people? I don't know, Martin, if you have any thoughts about it. You've been a member of WEF for a while as well.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I think it's lost its focus a bit. I think you could almost, what you just said, you could perhaps do differently without the baggage, if I can put it like that. I know this is a closed conversation, but I think there's too much baggage now around the forum. It's if you take the strategic group, the International Business Council is probably about 125 CEOs who pay their companies pay a fortune to engage, and I think it's become too much of a show. I mean, in the old days, this is the old fart talking. Sorry, in the old days, you had on the media side, you'd have Sumner Redstone, Rupert Murdoch, Robert Maxwell, would you believe, as well, all getting together for a day or two, Barry Diller, a day or two, with no other interruptions and no big programs around it. It's become too big and so to do the sort of things you're talking about, I think you probably have to focus it more. I mean, you're right. People meet, they have a conversation sort of like this, and it stimulates a lot of thoughts and progress. But I think there are some more targeted ways that one can deal with the problems. I think it's become, I think Klaus has to rethink, and maybe the pandemic is the vehicle to rethink the platform and rethink how it operates. Kate, I think we've got time for one more question. We've taken enough of Robert's time. So one more.
Yep, I'm going to end with this one because it's our second most popular and upvoted question. That it was interesting to see it get upvoted while you were chatting on student debt. It comes from Josh Clements, who works in London. Do you see value in an MBA program nowadays?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have children who are considering MBAs. I always look at, what do you want to do in your life and how focused are you? And, does that lead to, the career that you want? And in some cases, there's some kids who kind of come out of the womb saying they want to be X, right? I wasn't one of those kids. I was an engineer. I loved engineering. And then I got turned on to a whole different world of finance and the use of capital. And so I needed a watershed, which was an MBA, right? You go and now you can explore a bunch of things and say, wow, finance actually makes a lot of sense. Marketing makes a lot of sense. And so for people like me who want to switch careers, MBAs make a tremendous amount of sense because not all people grow up going to high school or college, in some cases, knowing exactly what they want to do. If you do, well, God bless you, right? But not many people do. So I think there's great advantage to it for sure. And for some, if you've got the skills and capacity to excel in your industry, you may not need it. Some industries start to create requirements for them. my industry in particular, in financial services, broadly speaking, vast majority of people do end up getting these MBAs because there's certain skills that you want them to have as they enter into your workforce that they may not necessarily get unless they go to very specialized finance schools. Well, if they go to those specialized finance schools, we're all of a sudden stuck with a diversity dynamic based on who gets into those schools, right? So, you've got to think about it a little more holistically as an employer too, that's why we need to have people who have come from different careers, gone through MBAs and said, you know what, and now I want to move into finance. And that broadens the employment pool for us.
The thing I would add to that, Robert, is I think, when I did mine, I was a member of the class that was described by the admissions dean as the most naive class at the Harvard Business School. It was the time of the draft, so a lot of Americans were jumping straight from first degree to graduate degree. But the average age of the entry was about 23, 24, and they came out at 25, 26. Now, I'm on a Spanish business school board at IESA in Madrid and Barcelona, and their entry age is about 27, 28. So the original concept was to have, 2 years experience after first degree, 2 years in a business school. I mean, the deal was with Goldman and McKinsey. With HBO, we'll take them for 2 years, you take them. And so I think it's got too long. So in answer to Josh, I think it was Josh's question, and this is a dangerous thing for me to say on this call, but if you're going to do it early. Don't do it late. So we may have lost some good people.
I was about to say you may have lost 1/3 of your class. So be it. Come apply at a Vista company.
There may be some questions that Kate has that I'll send you, Robert, and maybe if you get a chance, because we've run out of time, it'd be nice to get your responses. I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody at S4. We have about 5,000 people now in 31 countries. We're stimulated by this conversation, and we will make sure that we are not indulging in tokenism.
Well, again, thank you for inviting me, and anything we can do across our platform to enable, educate, inform, or just connect, happy to facilitate.
Well, it's a dangerous thing for you to offer because you'll be inundated, but thank you very much. And big thank you to Alan and your people for this, and we look forward to developing the relationship. And good luck with Carnegie, the Business Roundtable, and everything else that you do. God bless you.
Thank you. All right, bless you. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks.